Hello all and welcome to the official FanTeam podcast brought to you by FanTeam, the biggest daily fantasy site in Europe. My name is Andrew. Today I'm joined by fantasy football expert Wes Prickett, aka at FPL_Heisenberg, who's one of the best fantasy football managers around with 6 consecutive top 0.5% finishes in the official Fantasy Premier League game. It's great to have you on, Wes. How is your fantasy season going so far?
Yeah, cheers, Fergie. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, not too bad. It's early days, isn't it, yet to sort of be worried about overall ranking in official FPL or the FanTeam 1 million game. So yeah, I've scored 128 points so far in FanTeam,
Nice.
which is pretty good. I'm ranked about 7.5k.
Cool.
But obviously, like I say, early days in terms of rankings. Just happy with how the team's set up and looking to push on now.
Sure, there's just been so many goals and hat-tricks and lack of clean sheets. It's been absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Do you think that will go on in the coming weeks? And do you think that the empty stadiums are having an impact in terms of, just in terms of the more goals we're seeing?
I don't think it will continue at that rate. And the likes of Kane 4 assists, Son 4 goals, and then, like you said, hat-tricks for Calvert-Lewin, braces for Mitrovic, Ings. So many players scoring big points that if you got a player just getting, 1 goal, which would normally you'd be happy with, it wasn't good enough this week.
Yeah.
So it was a crazy week. It won't continue like that, I don't think. But yeah, it's interesting about the empty stadiums. Maybe there's that lack of defensive urgency that the fans demand.
Yeah, I wonder if there's
but
maybe more of like a training atmosphere rather than, that real competitive edge with stadiums packed full, and I'm not sure, but to have a record 44 goals, since the dawn of the Premier League, is you must be having some kind of impact.
Yeah.
So today, Wes and I are going to be looking ahead to the Gameweek 3 full round classic with a €50,000 prize pool on offer for just a €20 entry. We'll be running through the weekend's fixtures, sharing our entries with you. But before we jump into that, we just want to give a reminder of the season-long €1 million competition we've just been talking about, which you can still enter with 70% of the average points scored after Gameweek 2, which equates to 89 points. Wes, will you be entering any more teams this week?
Yes, I will be, because essentially you're getting an extra wild card, aren't you? You're getting to pick a team now. You can put in your Man City players that you obviously we can now get in, and your United players, and pick a brand new team based on the fixtures, and then obviously save your first wild card. And you're only, what did you say, 89 points, was it?
Yes, 89 average, yeah.
So it's not too far behind. My first entry was on, I think it was 128. So 29 points with 36 game weeks to go is nothing. So I'd probably say that the new team that I do will possibly outscore my original one, even though I'm only 29 points behind. That can be caught up very easily.
Yeah, so my game week 1 team is on 94.5 points, so I'm only 5.5 points above the average. So I'll definitely be entering a couple. As you say, we get all this information. It's basically an extra wildcard. We know, Everton players, Man City players, we know the form now, which we obviously didn't know in Game Week 1, so I'll certainly be entering some more as well. If you do want to take advantage of Game Week 2 average points, or take a look at the rules and prize for yourself, and our YouTube watchers can click on the top link in the description below, and our podcast listeners can go to fanteam.com and go to the EPL €1 million 2021 competition, where you can create your own team and compete for the massive prizes on offer. Just briefly on the prizes for those who haven't seen them. First prize is €200,000, second prize 100,000, third €60,000, fourth €40,000, all complete life-changing amounts of money, and the prizes go all the way down to 5,659th place, and the tournament is capped at 75,000 entries, so roughly 1 in 13 entries will cash. So absolutely fantastic competition, and really, really pleased to be a part of it. If you are new to our YouTube channel, please remember to click the subscribe button in the bottom right hand corner of the screen, and to press the like button if you enjoy our content. And just a reminder, to enter all FanTeam contests, you must be 18 or over and be gambleaware.org. So our feature tournament for this podcast and video is the full round 50k classic game. So our watchers and listeners are aware what it is. It is very similar to the free hit chip in FPL, where you basically pick the best 11 players for the game week that you think will score the most points. Simple. There are 3 full round classic tournaments every weekend. One has a prize pool of €6,000 with a first prize of around €1,200, which you can enter for as little as €2 an entry. There is a high roller tournament if you want to play for big money, but our feature tournament for this podcast is the €50,000 prize pool game with a €7,500 first prize for just a €20 entry. So for our YouTube watchers, we have the 10 Premier League matches on screen, which are Brighton versus Man United at 12:30, Crystal Palace versus Everton, West Brom and Chelsea, Burnley, Southampton, Sheffield United and Leeds, Spurs v Newcastle, Man City v Leicester, West Ham versus Wolves, Fulham versus Aston Villa, and Liverpool versus Arsenal. So, Wes, which of those fixtures stands out to you in terms of being able to pick out the players you want for this tournament?
Yeah, so I think the Wolves fixture away at West Ham, I can see Wolves getting a result there. I can see Liverpool getting a result at home to Arsenal. I know Arsenal have improved under Arteta over the last however long it's been, 6-7 months, but I still fancy Liverpool there to do well. Other than that, it's hard to call, isn't it? Because we're still only a couple of fixtures in. Form's a bit hard to tell. So say Crystal Palace, they beat Man United last weekend, and Everton also on good form. Who comes out on top there? Burnley obviously usually defensively sound, but conceded 4 at the weekend. Will they bounce back against Southampton, or will Danny Ings do the business for Southampton? So I think a lot of fixtures for me it's a bit hard to call. I don't know how you feel about the fixtures this week.
Yeah, I mean, you can only kind of judge on what's in front of you and what we know. There's not much kind of data information, but for I would say, just briefly running through, Brighton look very tight at the back. I think they look good. United looked a bit dour last weekend, though I do expect them to improve. I'm sure that Ole is going to give them a rocket this week. So players like Bruno Fernandes, potentially Rashford, potentially Martial, could be good options. Yeah. I think that Lamptey looks, I mean, what a performance he had last week. He was absolutely fantastic.
Unbelievable.
He was.
Unbelievable.
Palace and Everton, so even though Everton have been on fire, Palace have only conceded 1 goal in the last 2, so maybe that's one to avoid from an Everton view, but we'll take a look when we look at our teams. West Brom have shipped 8 goals in their first 2 games, so Chelsea, looking at players like potentially Werner, Mount, Havertz, wherever else, could be decent options. Burnley, Southampton, they've both been conceding quite a few goals. That could potentially be a bit of a goal fest, which you wouldn't naturally sort of think with a team like Burnley, but the way it started, it could be. Sheffield United and Leeds. So Leeds have scored a lot again, but they've conceded a lot. So we're not really sure there. And Spurs obviously come off the back of that incredible performance and result against Southampton last week. But they will probably come up against a more resolute defence in Newcastle, I would guess, this week. In terms of Man City and Leicester have got some issues at the back. I thought Man City looked fantastic against Wolves last week.
Very good.
Yeah, so I'll certainly be targeting a certain Belgian midfielder, I think. West Ham, obviously, we've had news that a couple of their players and their manager have got COVID-19, and Wolves, have looked very, very good in their opening too. So, as you mentioned, I think Wolves probably want to target as well. Fulham and Villa, we don't really know yet. And Liverpool, I would normally say, to target that Arsenal defence, but I do think Arsenal have looked a bit better. I think Arteta's a really good manager. But yeah, we'll see how that plays out. So if we can look then at your team, Wes, which you've got now on screen. Are you able to run through your team first for our podcast listeners and then kind of explain the rationale behind the picks?
Absolutely. So I've gone for Pope in goal. So in defence, I've got Robertson, Lamptey and Luca Dean. In midfield, I've got Kevin De Bruyne as my captain. And I've got Salah, Podence and Barnes. And then my 3 up top is Raul Jimenez, who's my vice-captain. And then I've got Mitrovic and Chris Wood.
Okay, so some interesting picks there. With the Podence and Barnes picks, they're probably a couple of maybe under the radar picks, rather than players like De Bruyne and Salah and Jimenez. Yeah. What is your thinking behind Podence and Harvey Barnes?
Yeah, so I'll start with Harvey Barnes. So far this season, he's had 10 shots in the box, which is joint with Mo Salah, another one of my picks, and Richarlison, who I haven't managed to squeeze in. I do think he's a good pick, though. So he's had 10 shots in the box, and watching the games as well, he's passing the eye test in terms of he's just so direct. He's getting the ball, he's running at defenders, he's shooting whenever he can. He's, just looking overall threatening, which he has done in the past, but a bit more streaky. Maybe now he's a little bit older, maybe will become more of a consistent player. And if you look at his price there, for our podcast listeners, he's 5.9 million, which is quite cheap because of his fixture against Man City, which is a tough fixture. But I do think Man City can still concede goals like they did against Wolves. So he's in there as a bit of a value pick, and how he started the season. And I think that Man City could concede maybe 1 or 2. And I do think he'll be involved if they do concede. And Podence, he looked very good against Man City, especially in the second half. He kind of went to that playing on the last man, getting in behind. He chipped the keeper that just went over. He nutmegged De Bruyne, crossed the ball in for Jimenez to head home.
That was incredible, wasn't it? What a piece of skill. How many players in the history of football can say that they've made Kevin De Bruyne? Absolutely amazing.
And then set up a goal as well.
So exactly.
Led to something, So that was incredible. So I think he's a good pick. And the fixture there, I think West Ham, they've got troubles there. I think I've seen Declan Rice in the news articles today saying, not sure how true it is, but he wants to force a move to Chelsea.
Oh.
And like you said about the COVID-19 issues, so I do think him and Jimenez could do well, which is why they're both in my team this week.
Cool. Mitrovic up front, so he started obviously really, really well, looks very dangerous. Missed the first game, much to the frustration of a lot of fantasy managers. Looked very good last week. So Villa looked quite resolute, I think, after lockdown at the end of last season, and and obviously kept a clean sheet last week. What do you think with Mitrovic?
So I've gone for Mitrovic because he's the main man for Fulham. He's going to take penalties like he did against Leeds. He's off the back of a brace. He's got proven Premier League pedigree over the years. He's always popped up with goals. So I think he could be a good pick this week. And the fixture, like you said, Villa have been a bit more resolute, but they played against 10 men for the majority of the game in their first game, and it is still Aston Villa. It's not playing against one of the big guns, so I'm happy with that pick.
Cool. There is a lack of Chelsea in your team, so they're away to West Brom. West Brom conceded 8 goals, and you've avoided Werner, Havertz, Mount, Hudson-Odoi, all these, potentially even Pulisic, Ziyech. What's your thinking there, or do you think there's just better options available?
Yeah, it's just a case of squeezing them all in and getting the right back. Obviously, you've got to spread the money around in a clever way. So it could easily backfire. I definitely backing Chelsea to score a couple. I'm just hoping the players I've picked can outdo them, really. So maybe you have scared me a little bit about reminding me about Chelsea, but it's just a case of not being able to squeeze them all in, I think.
Of course. Get another entry in, mate. Get another entry and cover some bases, I think. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so moving on to my team, the team I've got for our podcast listeners. So I've gone for Guaita in goals for Palace. I then got double Wolves defence of Saiss and Willy Bolly. I've got Luca Dean, the same as Wes. In midfield, I've got Kevin De Bruyne. I've also got Harvey Barnes. I've gone for Bruno Fernandes. And then I've gone for Burke of Sheffield United, their new signing. He's very, very cheap in FanTeam, and they're home to Leeds, but I'll touch on that now. I've then got a strike force of Wood, Jimenez and Werner. So I think the key differences between my side and your side is I'm not that pro Liverpool as you, which has maybe allowed me to spread my funds a bit better. So I've gone for Bruno Fernandes in midfield. So United look pretty awful last week, but as I mentioned, they I think they'll improve this week. They did score 3 home and away against Brighton last year. Bruno's nailed on for penalties. He's going to be, he strikes me as quite, a very driven and emotional guy for success. So I'm sure after last week, they're not going to want to drop more points and be potentially 6 points, off or even 9 points behind teams like, Everton and wherever else after a couple of games. So I think United will bounce back. Yeah. Same for Barnes. De Bruyne for me, complete no-brainer. Best player in the league on penalties at home to Leicester. So already mentioned, we've both gone forward. So Burnley at home to Southampton, obviously chipped a few goals. He's also on penalties for Burnley as well. He's quite a nice price, I think, at 8.1. Jimenez, I think, is quite cheap this week at 9.9. If you look at the other players, like De Bruyne, Salah, Bruno, they're all 11, 12, 13, 14. He's only 9.9, and he's looked really, really good, I think, at the start of the season. There's no European distraction there either. He's got some really quality players around him. I think Jimenez is a really good pick, and I've gone for Werner. So he is expensive, 13.9 million. As Jorginho missed a penalty last week, I do wonder whether Werner will be on penalties. And as the players start to return back from injuries, Jorginho may actually find himself out of the team altogether. So I think Werner is a really good pick there. Double Wolves defence, I can understand you going for Podence. I think Podence is a very good pick, but I do wonder whether Bolly at 7.7 could match Podence' output at 8.9, just a bit of a save in there. And I've gone for Guaita because obviously in FanTeam, and this is different to other fantasy games, you do get points for saves, and Guaita is such a good shot stopper. I do expect Everton to have lots of shots. They're playing really well, so I think that Guaita may get a few points there. Burke in midfield at 6.6. I think he's the one that kind of unlocked the team value-wise to be able to afford a couple of the more expensive ones. So very happy with that team, and I think I'm wildcarding in the FanTeam 1 million game this week. I'm also wildcarding in FPL. I've got a fair few picks. I've gone for Werner, Jimenez, De Bruyne, Burke, Fernandes, Saiss. I've got a lot of those players in my wildcard team as well. So I'm quite excited about this team. I think it's got a good chance to maybe scoop that first prize of 7,500. I've also entered a couple of other entries. So as you can see, I've captained Werner in this one, but I've entered the same team again, captain Kevin De Bruyne as well. To try and cover a few bases. So what are your thoughts, Wes?
Yeah, no, that's good. And I like you say, you can enter multiple entries, so you can put the same team, but then just change the captain like you've done, or you could change a couple of players or do a brand new 11, which is handy. Captain Werner again, that could really pay off dividends. I think a lot of people get a bit too impatient in fantasy games, and with Werner, people are losing patience. But he's playing probably the worst defense in the league so far, and he's looked really sharp in the games in both games that I've watched, the two Premier League games he's played. He's won a penalty in both. He's just looked sharp and fast, and I think goals are around the corner for him. Whether it's this week or not, I'm not sure, but he will come good 100%. And a couple of other interesting picks. I like the double up and Wolves defense. They're one of the best defenses in the league, and we had a similar thought process on keepers. I was basically picking Pope based off last season, all his save points that he used to get, and similar for Gracia. And Burke, I watched Sheffield United game, and comments from Chris Wilder about saying how he wants to use him up front and use his pacing behind. So obviously he's a midfielder in FanTeam and in FPL, but he's actually going to be played as a striker. So you've got another route to points there. And again, like you've already touched on, he's a value pick to allow you to get some of the more expensive players in.
I was talking to Holly last week, and the key really to unlocking the affordability of players like, having De Bruyne, Werner, etc., is really finding those one or two enablers. And I think Burke, so, Leeds have conceded, I want to say, 7 goals in 2 games.
7, yeah.
They've scored a lot of goals as well. I think they've scored 7 and conceded 7, but they're very much end-to-end. Their defence is a bit all over the place. Yeah. Keeper doesn't look the best either at the moment. So, I just think, even if he gets an assist or a goal, it would be a massive bonus. But even if not, he does help me to afford all those other premium options. So I'm really enjoying this tournament, because it's kind of like having played the official fantasy game for years and years, and you're kind of hamstrung a little bit every week of only making one transfer or whatever else. It's quite refreshing and liberating to just be able to pick this one-off team every single week and know you're in a chance for winning a lot of cash as well. I used to spend £5, £10 or £20 on stinking accumulators, 20 team accumulators, and one would come in every 5 years. Where with this, you're actually using your fantasy knowledge and skill to potentially win a lot of money. So
absolutely, and like you said, it is liberating in terms of in FPL or the FanTeam season-long game. You're kind of picking a player. You're looking at the next 6 fixtures, aren't you? You're not looking at one fixture. So you kind of have to compromise there. But here you can just go, boom, the players you want for that game week. You just need to look at one fixture, which makes it easier as well. There's less planning involved in terms of the long-term stuff, and you can you can go for it. Like, so Mitrovic isn't the player I'd go for in the season-long FanTeam game or season-long official FPL, but in a 1 week punt against Aston Villa, I'm more than happy to bring him in for this game.
Cool. And were there any other players, that you had in mind that didn't quite make the cut, Wes, for your team?
Yeah, so I when I initially drafted my team, I had Martinez in goal for Villa. But then once I brought Mitrovic in, I didn't want them playing each other, so I changed that. I also went for a 5-4-1 formation in an earlier draft that had players like Jamal Lewis at Newcastle. I know Tottenham's not a great fixture, but he's been relatively attacking down from left back, and he was really cheap. I also had players like Sace, like you did, and I had Grealish in midfield actually, which I just changed my mind on just because he's a great player, but is he going to affect the game in terms of goals and assists? I kind of thought maybe not. So I changed a few players there, but I think that's quite a good advice to people to. So yeah, I just think it is a good tactic to do a draft and then build upon it again and change it, because looking back at first draft now, thinking back to it, I'm not happy with it, and that extra 10 or 15 minutes or tinkering with your team, putting in better players and actually thinking about everyone will hopefully pay dividends for myself.
Hey, thank you, Wes. Some great advice there as well. That is it for us for this episode. If you want to join in the season-long €1 million FanTeam game, remember it's capped at 75,000 entries, so use the top link below to start picking your team with a head start of 89 points and wildcard in hand. To play the full-round classic game, which we have talked about on this video and podcast, the link is also below. It's €20 to enter with a €50,000 prize pool guaranteed. So thank you so much, Wes, for joining me this week. We will have you on again very soon, I'm sure. And obviously, best of luck for your entries for the weekend as well, both in the season-long game and in the classic 50k. If you win, mate, you can buy me a pint.
Will do, mate. Cheers.
Excellent. Remember that if you liked what you watched, please press the like button and remember to subscribe to the channel at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. And if you're listening on a podcast, please rate the podcast and leave a comment. So this podcast will be available as a video on the FanTeam YouTube channel and available as an audio podcast on all major podcast libraries, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts and SoundCloud. Just search for official FanTeam podcast from wherever you get your podcasts. Our website is www.fanteam.com and our Twitter handles are @FanTeamOfficial and @FanTeam_UK. Give us a follow for regular game updates and for entry giveaways. We'll be back next week looking ahead to the Game Week 4 full round classic. See you then and goodbye for now.